I do hope you have brought some sandwiches here today, because this is going to be two sermons in one. You don't usually get that here. But now in my 15th year of retirement, I have no desire or wish to be profound. The days of my profundity are over, and I am reminded of those days in the singing of the song this morning, which I believe has something to do with the University of Oxford. I want to say several things here today, and the first is this. In the years of my retirement, this has been my home church. Not that I come every Sunday, nor do you, of course. Someone said, "What do you do in your retirement?" I do exactly what my neighbors do. It's not to go to church. But sometimes I do, and when I come, I am well pleased. My stall or entire pew is behind where the Jacksons sit, these two lovely children and their father and mother. And I'm enormously pleased to say and know that they have been called up to this end of the church to do wonderful duties. I salute you. I'm also in my retirement and on the pension fund, which arrives at the last day of the month, to have been treated enormously kindly. That's an adverb telling how I've been treated by Priest Mary in her tenure here, and now in the tenure of the incumbent, Father Garrett. When I left the cotton fields of Rapides Parish on the Missouri Pacific train to go to Lexington, Kentucky, to begin my studies as an undergraduate in that old college, which my old Uncle John Paul was once the president, Asbury, and that's how I got there, because of him. On the first day of the assembly, there was a tall, good-looking, hairdo man. His name was Professor Osapoof, and he had a wife named Rachel. Professor Osapoof was a Russian, and he played in the Moscow Symphony. Rachel, who also was a musician, a violinist, as was he, was not permitted to play in the symphony because only men were allowed to play in the symphony. So Rachel and the likes of Rachel had one duty, and that was to give birth to male people who could then play in the Moscow Symphony. But Professor Osapoof said to this gathered tribe, I didn't know, I'd never heard of a Russian except the Russians were red and they were bad and they were going to destroy America. Well, we see how that's worked out, but that's another sermon, if I'm ever invited back here. But Professor Osapoof said, young people, you are here for two reasons. First reason, you are here to gain a new knowledge. Well, that's quite impressive if you've come from a cotton patch. The second reason is that you are to gain understanding. When I became the rector of this church a very long time ago, in 1968, I wrote those two words in the sacristy on a blotter board. You are here for new knowledge and understanding. I think that's what we are here for, is to gain new knowledge, and with the new knowledge, understanding. I said to Ginger, as I say a lot of things to her, how much she listens I do not yet know. But the query last week was, as they say in the ad, with everything going on in the world, how do we go about correcting wrongs? Well, I think we begin with knowledge, not denial, but by acknowledging that we know some things about which we can do something, and there are some things we do not know about, which we must find out about. And then we must understand what we are to do about what we know. When I told my father, who's now dead, a very wise man, a very gentle man, unlike my mother, I'm giving her honor, people would say about Newton and Millie's children, 6 boys and 1 girl, they get their gentleness from their father. They get their toughness from their mother. But he did say, when I said, I'm going into the church, that's the way we used to, lesser educated people would say, when you start preaching, that was a country way of saying it, when you start preaching, so and so. He said, I hope you will do 2 things. One is you will keep in touch with me. And the second thing is you'll keep your sense of humor. Because what I see, there's a lot of dour people in churches. Well, I have had to work on that business. And sometimes my humor is not humorous to the dour. And then he said another thing, which he says, this will be advice. He wasn't much for a lot of advice. Therefore, a lot of things were called sins I didn't know about. We'd all been doing them in the country. And do remember when you're getting new knowledge, and he said another thing, you know, we give the cows hay. I said, yes, I mean, we all had to throw the hay. I mean, that was a part of being there. He said, you don't give the cows all the hay at once. You spread it out. And when you start preaching, don't give the people everything you know at one feeding. Well, sometimes I've taken that advice, at other times I've ignored it. And today I'm ignoring it in honor of my dear mother. First, I want to talk about the Good Shepherd. Today is one of my favorite days in all the church, and how fortunate that the rector had to go on a holiday with his husband-to-be, and I was called on to preach. And as good fortune would have it, and some would say, as God's will would have it, The organ which I gave to the church is in play. Now, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. Shepherds. Did you know, and this may be new knowledge, did you know that when a man or a woman, now women are being executed, the last words they hear are the words by the chaplain who reads them the 23rd Psalm? I wonder how many times I've read it here at the burial of the dead or at the graveyard. It's the 23rd Psalm about the shepherd, what the shepherd does, cares for the sheep. And if you look at the stained glass window, I believe it's been removed. No, there it is. At the very center, there is a shepherd's staff and a bishop's mitre. When this church was built, Episcopalians didn't believe too much in bishops. And so there was great exception to that symbolism. Shouldn't it be the Bible? Well, after all, it was Shreveport. But the wiser heads prevailed. And so we have in this wonderful stained glass window the symbolism of the shepherd, the bishop, with his staff, caring for us, his sheep. Sometimes when I read that psalm on a brisk, lovely day in the graveyard, my mind travels to the Garden of Eden. For this symbolism of the Good Shepherd in the garden brings to mind the sweetness of creation. Everyday routine. And thank God I'm finished with everyday routines, except my martinis. The image and experience of quietness and cool evenings. Psalm 23 maps out a geography of blessing. The believer strolls through God's backyard, which is strewn with paths and valleys, and ends with a seat at a table in the house of the Lord. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Here endeth the first sermon, and some new knowledge, perhaps. While Mother's Day that we celebrate on this day is the second Sunday in May, it's a fairly recent development. The basic idea goes back to ancient mythology. It goes back to the long civilizations of Greeks and Romans. The Greeks paid homage to Cybele. Now, for you scholars, some of you are always telling me I've mispronounced a word. And I don't usually do that, but sometimes I do. So I shall spell it for you. Cybele. She's the mother figure of the gods in Greek mythology. And the Romans, not to be outdone by the Greeks, of course, had their own celebration of the mother of their gods. In 16th century England, a celebration called Mothering Sunday was begun. And it still exists. And we've kept it when Father Karras was here, a Canadian, who was always keeping something English. We had Mothering Sunday here. A Sunday set aside for visiting your mother. The eldest son or daughter would bring a mothering cake, which would be cut and shared by the entire family. Family reunions were the order of the day, with sons and daughters assuming all household duties and preparing a special dinner in honor of their mother. Wonder how many people are preparing like that in Shreveport. I imagine there's a lot of mothers scurrying about the kitchen, getting ready for Mother's Sunday for their lovely children. Sometimes during the day in the 16th century, the mother would attend special church services with her family. Wonder how much of that's going on in Shreveport. Anna Jarvis. Now, this will ring a bell for you, and I'm almost finished, but not quite finished. Anna Jarvis, after her mother died in 1905, wished to memorialize her mother's life and started campaigning for a national day to honor all mothers. Her mother, known as Mother Jarvis, was a young Appalachian homemaker and a lifelong activist who had organized Mother's Work Days to save the lives of those dying from polluted water. During the Civil War, Mother Jarvis had also organized women's brigades, encouraging women to help without regard for which side their men had chosen. At the time, there were many special days for men, but none for women. On May 10, 1908, when this church was consecrated, 1908, a service was held at a church in Grafton, West Virginia, where Anna's mother had taught. Thus was born the idea that the second Sunday in May be set aside to honor all mothers, dead or alive. In 1914, that Presbyterian, President Woodrow Wilson, whose body is entombed in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Woodrow Wilson signed a bill designating the second Sunday in May as a legal holiday to be called Mother's Day, dedicated, as he said, to the best mother in the world, your mother. you are here not only to worship God, but for new knowledge and understanding. I'm glad to be with you. Bring out the sandwiches.